We call to order the meeting for the Zoning Board of Appeals for the City of Easthampton. Today is Wednesday, November 10th, 2021. As a result of the current pandemic, we are all remote via Zoom, and we are also holding this at a special date and time as a result of the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday. So, correspondence and requests for comments back from other boards, committees, or officials?
None received.
Okay. And is there anyone from the public who is interested in addressing the board regarding any item that is not currently on the agenda? And no. So then we will go to the minutes of the August 25th, 2021 meeting. Is there any questions, concerns, thoughts, or commentary? Okay, with that, can I get a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve the August minutes.
Okay,
I second.
Steve, you second?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Show of hands. Okay, so moved. And at which point we will then go back to our only agenda item for this evening, which is a continuation of our September 22nd, 2021 meeting by way of a discussion concerning the public hearing procedure. So with that, we've all had a chance to review the meeting, the rules and regulations that Curtis sent out, and the revised version came out. So is there further discussion? Why don't we start at the top? We can go down, and anything that is in yellow, do we want to review, or do people have another idea? Okay, so with that, I will read the paragraph before, or the section, and then the paragraph before, so we kind of get a gist of where we are. This is under ZBA officers. If a vacancy occurs in the office of vice chairperson, the board shall elect a new vice chairperson from among its members at its first regular meeting after the vacancy has been occurred. Now, new section, if at any point there are fewer than 5 appointed regular members of the Zoning Board of Appeals, the board chairperson shall promote the currently appointed associate member with the most seniority to serve in the vacant regular member role. Concurrently, that member shall also apply to the mayor to be officially promoted to regular member status. In the case that no current associate member will want to be promoted to regular member status, the position will be made available to members of the public who are not currently board members. Does that kind of sound reasonable?
I think so.
Yep.
Okay. That, if you are currently an associate member, you are in line for quote unquote promotion. Although some people may deem it a demotion. Okay, continuing down. Meetings. Section 5, meetings. The ZBA will meet on the 4th Wednesday of each month. Meetings will begin at 6 p.m. and end at 7:30. Meetings are held in municipal building unless otherwise posted with proper notice in accordance with the Massachusetts Open Meeting Law. The frequency, time, and place may be changed by a majority vote of the ZBA. Each applicant before the board has a time allotment of 45 minutes per meeting agenda, inclusive of all public commentary and board member inquiry. There shall be no more than 2 public hearings or public meeting items per ZBA meeting. So does that sound reasonable?
Well, I know in the past, I think we've had some difficulty with the 45 minutes. I know we want to try to keep the time frame down. So that just might be an issue. I like the 45 minutes, but when you go back to the pool hall, how that just carried on month after month after month.
Do you feel that the pool hall would have been resolved sooner if we kept talking about it?
I don't think we would have been able to do anything if we try to keep it within 45 minutes. I guess that's what I'm looking at. So
how about if can we change that verbiage to the best effort will be made
Yeah,
to
so
keep people to a 45-minute time span?
so looking
but-
at that section now, as a board time allotment.
Can I add a historical perspective?
Sure.
So before 2014 or so, there were no time limits or number of limits on the number of applications per meeting. And sometimes there would be 5 or 6 applications per meeting, and the meetings went on for many hours. Tony's nodding his head, remembers that well. John's also remember that. So at the time, I think John and I discussed this, and we said, let's try to limit the agendas to no more than 4 applications in a meeting, because that just seemed reasonable. And in the situation where the agendas get full, the board chair had discretion to put time limits on each agenda item. But for meetings where there was when there was maybe 1 or 2 applications, there was no need to put a time limit on each agenda item. And so those were not, and it could be it was informally done at the discretion of the chair to limit an agenda item or not. I think that limiting to 2 public hearings per agenda would be, could run into problems because there are statutory time limits for when the ZBA has to act on certain applications. So if the agenda items are limited to 2, and we get many requests all at the same month, we could be in a situation where we either have to go meet to allow the administrator to add more items to the agenda, or there's just going to be more meetings in a month in order to satisfy that requirement. So I would recommend against putting time limits and agenda limits in a hard and fast language in this. I think that you're trying to make it something that's,
One size fits all.
yeah, or just trying to make it so that way, like at the discretion of the chair, the meetings can be, the agenda items can be limited, would be
Okay.
more in keeping with also what other boards and committees do in the city.
Okay. So if we change that to at the discretion of the board, I guess board chair, every effort will be made to keep it to a 2-hour maximum meeting or an 1.5-hour maximum meeting? What do we want to say? Or do we not even want to put that in there?
Well,
Curtis?
you say in the previous section, an hour and a half, beginning at 6 and ending at 7:30. And again, it's also a little abnormal to have a hard cap on the end of the meeting.
Okay.
But, again, just trying to, sometimes meetings go longer and there's just the need you need to deal with it. You can't always just say, we're going to cut off discussion, to the best of your abilities, and to make meetings fast is always great.
Right. So how about if we say, to the best of our ability, each applicant will be given a 45-minute time slot to present their case, including public commentary and board review. Should time allow, or should the agenda need additional time, the board will agree to extend that time frame. So it encourages people to be concise. And it also will encourage, it should encourage board members and the public to not sit there and beat a dead horse over some things, as we've been known to do.
Yeah. I just think like when we have these Zoom meetings, it's very limited participation, but I'm thinking about the Parsons Village thing where you'd have a meeting and 100 people show up and everybody wants to speak. And if everybody doesn't get their chance to speak, then you can't legally do that, right?
Correct.
It's been challenged before, yeah.
Yeah.
What we can do, if there is, should we have another 40B application, similar to what we did with Parsons Village, where we had a secondary meeting per month just for that applicant. And we also presented timeframes for public speak, in that your public speak time was 2 minutes.
2 minutes, yeah.
And you had to queue, and if you started to repeat things that other people had said, you could be dismissed without use of your full 2 minutes.
And I'll just remind you all that there's also a separate set of rules and regulations just for the comprehensive permit applications.
Okay.
So,
Right.
So this is just for these set of rules and regulations are not necessarily dealing with those 40B applications.
Right. Steve?
Maybe I'm not in the right area or not, but I was just thinking, if you do have a large group of people and they all want to say something, can we request that there be a spokesperson on behalf of the group that are present? No?
No, because it's public speak. Everyone has the opportunity to speak.
All right. I'm still learning as I go.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well,
Sometimes groups of residents will organically do that. Like if a group of abutters have put together a letter, then they'll have one person who says, here are the views of the neighbors here. But frankly, for public speak, very frequently, if there's a bunch of people opposed, every person will say it just to, for want of a better term, bludgeon the board with that opinion, just to really get their point across.
Yeah.
And the rules and regs do include language that says, the board may cut short duplicative comments, and we want to direct people to not repeat themselves or repeat something somebody else said. But that's about as strong as we can get on that one, just because of free speech protections, which, make perfect sense to me. It's frustrating for a function of a board, but
we may need to strike that whole section. Because I think the more I'm listening to it and reading it, it does sound very, this is all you get.
Right. Yeah.
And, we try to, if we know it's going to be a short item and then we had a continuation, obviously a continuation was something that was taking longer. So let's get the new item on and off the agenda as quick as possible. But I mean, heck, I can remember chicken meetings taking 2 hours. Yes, Matt, you're muted. Oh,
Matt, you're muted right now.
You're still
Just one quick thing from me, going back to what Jamie pointed out. Do we also want to take out the meetings begin at 6 p.m. and end by 7:30? Or should we have it shall end approximately by 7:30? If additional time is needed, then it'll be allocated.
yeah. Or every attempt will be, no, let's just say meetings start at 6 p.m. Because, I think that, we all understand. What's there? There he is.
Are we sorry? So this idea of whether it ends or not, it sounds like in the past there was wide open, and I can understand that. There's some good points, arguments of that. But if we just have an open-ended meeting, it's kind of hard for us as board members to know, are we just supposed to block off our whole entire evening to go to the meeting? Shouldn't there be some end point?
What we have done in the past is if we know it's going to be a contentious hearing, we have drawn the line at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, in that we are all volunteers. We are all doing this out of the goodness of our heart, and thereby shouldn't have to be subjected to midnight meetings. But, if it's what we think is going to be a simple hearing and it keeps going, every attempt is made to blow the whistle at 8 o'clock, but sometimes they go a little longer. And I just think we have to be understanding that if we're making a decision and the bell tolls 8 o'clock, we don't end the meeting. Let's spend the extra 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever it is, to try to get that agenda item off the list so that everything can keep moving forward.
I can understand that, but I guess it's tricky. Let's say you have a commitment that it's hard to plan one's own schedule, and if a board member has to leave for a commitment that they say, oh, I got to pick up my kid at 8:30.
Well, and I think that
I'd rather reschedule and say, hey, this is our time limit. If it's really an intensive discussion, we have to schedule a separate meeting. And if it takes longer, then the applicants should make a better effort to be concise.
Jamie?
I just, so right now, and hopefully going forward, the board is in a situation where you have 5 full members and a few associate members. If a board member has a prior commitment, they have to leave, they can excuse themselves. I mean, that's happened in the past. There are times when we don't get every board member at every meeting. But I think to the best of the board members' abilities, this being a member of the board, it's a volunteer public servant position where you're serving the community, and the expectation is that you do what it takes to provide this service for the city. From an applicant's perspective, they're spending on the order of $500 or so between application fees and legal fees just to appear before the board, which may not be that much for a big commercial project, but a lot of what the ZBA sees are residential determinations for someone wanting to build, an addition to their house or open up a small home business. Delaying that decision for a month just because, we want to keep it at 45 minutes can have profound impacts to them. So I think that it would behoove the board to be very flexible, put this, if it's important to keep this language in, then keep putting it in there as a way that the board will, aspirational. The board strives to keep meetings to under 2 hours and strives to give everybody, each applicant, at least an hour. In my experience with the board, I don't recall many hearings going less than an hour. Even the fast ones, there were a few very fast ones that went in like 20 or 30 minutes, but
410 Main Street.
But like most of them seemed to go, on average, the hearings went for about an hour apiece. It's my memory.
Well, and I think that, I know that when I get an agenda and I look at how many items are on it, even if it's something simple, it's an hour. The best bet is to say each agenda item is going to be an hour. And the best thing we can do is if our quorum cannot fulfill the evening, then we say that at the beginning of the meeting and say, okay, as a result of other commitments that members of the board have, we are going to need to stop the meeting at 7:30. Because, example, if there's 3 people on the agenda, in an effort to give you all a chance to speak and hopefully be able to get through this, we will look at giving everybody 30 minutes. We thank you for your understanding in this matter. We are all, volunteer public servants, and as a result, we will try to get through all of them. But if you would like to get approved, make it happen.
Will these guidelines be available to the public once we finalize it?
Yes.
They'll be posted on easthamptonma.gov/ZBA, and anybody who visits that page to view applications and decisions will also see them in basically the same box on the website.
Thank you.
No problem. I think one
Whether
last.
people read them or not, Steve, is another question. We have probably spent more time reading them than the applicants for the last 5 years.
So I've heard a couple of different perspectives. I want to offer some possible language. We've got the language as it is. We've got the possibility of each applicant before the board shall make every effort to conclude any hearing items for consideration in a single meeting for any meeting agenda, inclusive of all public commentary and board member inquiry within 45 minutes. Should time allow, the board may continue hearings indefinitely to preserve the possibility of review. And then in that same, aspirational language rather than mandatory, meetings begin at 6 p.m. In order to preserve the greatest opportunity of quorum, meetings are scheduled to end by 8 p.m. but maybe continued by the board. Something shaky like that.
I would not say maybe continued. I think it's
continued is a special word.
But I would just say, meetings begin at 6 p.m. and the board will try to end by 8 p.m. We'll make every effort to end by 8 p.m. or we'll do their best to end by 8 p.m.
Yeah, every effort will be made to conclude the meetings by 8 p.m.
One thing that I think I want to highlight here in all of this discussion about timing is I would love to make sure that the board discusses the idea of an agenda item or a public hearing limit. There is right now it's proposed that we have 2 public hearings in a single ZBA meeting. We could set an aspirational limit, but I do want to. This is actually a uniquely powerful tool, having an aspirational limit like that, because then I can say to applicants, I'm sorry, I can't wedge you in on that meeting. We've already got 2 public hearings. I've had to contact John as board chair before to say, hey, this is going to bring us up to 3 or 4 items. Are we comfortable with that? And that's something we can continue doing, no problem. But there is some merit to maybe having an aspirational limit of 2 public hearing items per agenda that could go above to, via discussion with the administrator or board chair. I know that's hazy language, and
what we do run into the challenge of is, as Jamie mentioned earlier, the time condition in that once they file their application, a hearing must begin.
All right. Yeah, the 60-day rule.
Within the 60 days. Now, what we can do is you can tell the applicant, okay, we will put you on the agenda to meet that requirement, but understand that it is going to be a 5-minute time slot for us to continue the hearing, or is that not legal?
It's fine, but we keep in mind, we also send out notices to abutters, and if we're going to, it's fine to tell the applicant that, but you're inviting, let's say it's a contentious hearing and 20 abutters show up and they wait through 2 hours of meeting to only be told, oh, you just get 5. We're just opening it and continuing it. We're not even taking public comment. In that case, it would be better to just not have that item on the agenda and putting it to another meeting.
Can we go with verbiage? Every effort will be made to limit the number of applicants, the number of agenda items per meeting to 2. Should a special occasion occur, yeah, there is room. Or are we better off not putting anything?
Yeah.
I think your administrator, myself, or whoever it should be in the future, could also just take it as an informal direction that we understand the board's wish is to not review more than 2 public hearing items, and then if it goes above 2 for statutory reasons, me or my replacement contacts the board chair and says, hey, are we okay with a 3rd agenda item or something like that, without it being enshrined in the rules here. As long as the administrator or myself understands that to be the board's wish, I'm comfortable defending that to applicants. But I didn't without that direction, I don't want to guess and, you know.
I think two is too limiting. Three would three would seem reason. I can't remember. There were in recent years. I can't remember more than 3 applications on a hearing on an agenda item. 4 was the informal limit that we had before Curtis took over.
So how about if we don't put any limit on it? Because we're making a rule for something that rarely happens. And there is open dialogue or communication between the planning department and the board itself. And I think that if you come out and say, hey, look, next meeting, I know it's a lot, but we're going to have 4 applicants, but they appear, they look like they're going to be easy applications. But in the same respect, if it's 2 really doozies, then you say, no, we can't do it. There has to be some gut check by the department and the board that says, look, that's going to be too much. But I think if in the back of our head we know that this is kind of the rules we want to play by, we can make it happen without having to have a rule in place that says this. Does that make sense to folks?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what Curtis is trying to say.
Yeah, but let's wipe that off of that.
So right now I have language that says the ZBA will meet on the 4th Wednesday of each month. Meetings begin at 6 p.m. and the board will make every effort to conclude meetings by 8 p.m. Meetings are held in the municipal building unless otherwise posted with proper notice in accordance with Massachusetts open law. The frequency and time and place can be changed by a majority vote of the ZBA. Each applicant before the board shall make every effort to conclude any hearing item for consideration on any agenda within 45 minutes. Let me just on that. Inclusive of any public commentary. Should time allow, the board may continue hearing items if they feel they need more further information or to allow for public comment. Or do we want to strike any time limits that are proposed?
I think we need to strike the time limit, because if not, there's going to be somebody who wants to put in a front step that drags it out for 45 minutes because the rule says I have 45 minutes to sit here.
Yeah, go work the other way. Yeah.
And also, if when we have multiple hearings, I know in the past there's been times that were put on there for when those hearings start. And if you base that on a 45-minute and the first hearing takes 5 minutes, we now have to sit there for 40 minutes and twiddle our thumbs until 6:45 when the next applicant, according to the agenda, posted time, everything says when their hearing is supposed to start. It is better to say meetings start at 6 p.m. All agenda items are on for 6 p.m. and there's no say as to how long each one gets. We can tighten it up and say, okay, well, I think we've heard enough. Does the board have anything else they need to hear? Thank you very much. We can move on from now.
And I'll also add under the next section, conduct of meetings, there's a line in there that says the chairperson may limit the amount of time for discussion for any particular meeting item. So there's already language in there that allows the board chair to say, we're going for 45 minutes. We have 4 agenda items on the thing. We have 2 hours to do it. We're going for half an hour for each meeting or 45 minutes for each item. Or you can make that as an ad hoc decision based off the rules without having it be prescriptive.
Yep.
Okay.
Noted.
Okay. Further discussion?
I'm good.
I'm good with that.
Okay. Moving on. Conduct of meeting. The chairperson or other presiding officer shall call each meeting to order and inform all present that they will identify speakers as appropriate for the respective portion of the meeting. And those wishing to speak must identify themselves by raising their hand or otherwise non-verbally expressing a desire to speak. Wait to be identified, granted the floor by the chairperson or presiding officer. Alternatively, the chairperson or other presiding officer shall call each meeting to order and inform all present that they will identify speakers as appropriate for the respective portion of the meeting. Applicants and meetings of the public wishing to speak must identify themselves by raising their hand or otherwise non-verbal expression and wait to be identified and granted the floor by the chairperson or presiding officer. ZBA board members are exempt from these requirements and the following rules of conduct included under Section 6, Conduct of Meetings. Yes, sir.
So there's a couple of things I want to address. The first is that this section was subject to a lot of edits by various parties on the stylistic, like word choice and references to the various different meeting forms by which we're currently meeting. Various different board members provided commentary regarding how these things could function via Zoom versus in person. And one theme that came across in various people's edits, for which I'm very appreciative, is that some of the problems with meeting conduct that we're experiencing are unique to remote meetings rather than being true to meetings at all times, at all places. So I want to encourage the board, to encourage the board to consider the future of returning to in-person meetings at some point and whether we think that this conduct of meeting section is overkill for in-person meetings. I've heard from various board members that it's believed that it'd be a little bit smoother and easier to operate in person with or without these rules. But if you want these rules for both Zoom and in person, they are drafted here and we can feel free to adopt them or not as you see fit.
I would comment that I think, like in the previous section, I think we're much better to not hardwire in very restrictive language. And in this case, for a couple of reasons. One is for matters of free speech. And I think in some of the comments that I submitted, which are not exactly reflective of the yellow text, but I think it seems a little bit in the direction of what I was saying, is that the ZBA board member has the right to speak at any time and can interrupt an applicant as needed, for example, to make a motion. And I just think we don't want to have a situation where the board member can't make a motion and is trying to wave his hand and is hidden off the Zoom screen. And so I think it's fine to say, yes, this is the goal, is that applicants would raise their hand or anyone make a comment, but we on the board, we have certain rights as board members and we don't want to infringe upon those in the very guidebook that we're creating.
Can I respond to that?
Jamie?
I think, Matt, you're correct in that historically the board has not really, the board has not limited each other's abilities to speak or present or make motions, but there was a understanding that the board tried to not to interrupt each other and let discussions play out before motions were made, and weren't trying to just rush through an agenda item just to make a motion and move on and get to the next thing, but was actually trying to give everything its due process and time. So, and I guess what I've seen in Zoom is that because everyone is shown on a flat screen and there's no hierarchy of who's on the board and who's a member of the public, who's an abutter, who's just commenting on it, it does get confusing when everyone starts just jumping in, and having some sort of process for Zoom makes a lot of sense. On the other hand, when you come back to an in-person meeting and you have the board members sitting at the front at the table and there's more, there's separation between the board members and the public, it's easier to, that separation kind of creates a situation where there's less talking over each other. And then the other piece, sorry, I'm lost my train of thought, but there's just someone in the waiting room right now. So I think it's important though to have this sort of process in place, knowing that there will be times when people want to talk and just have to wait for the process to play out, or the current discussion to play out before they can make their motion or go to the next thing. So I don't know if that's helpful. That's my thought.
Okay. So,
Oh, sorry. I remember where I was going with that. Also, as the administrative person, taking minutes is incredibly hard when there's multiple conversations and crosstalk. And so just for an administrative perspective of taking notes on the meeting and what happened, if the conversation is kept one at a time, then that just makes that job much, much easier.
So my hope is that Zoom will teach people not to talk over each other, for the simple fact that it makes it difficult to hear what everyone is saying. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's a wishful thought. After a year plus of doing this, we should know to stop and listen to each other. But with that, Lisa, welcome to the board. You can unmute yourself, or we can do that. There you go. So welcome to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Thank you. Thank you. I apologize for being a little bit late. I had a work situation that ran a bit past 5.
That's okay.
But I'm very happy to be here. So thank you.
Okay. We are currently reviewing our rules and regulations.
Mm-hmm.
So it has been a multi-meeting agenda item. And so we are trying to figure out how we should all conduct each other in the meetings. But welcome, and we hope you enjoy the fun things that we do.
Thank you.
So I agree with what you're saying, Jamie, in that with the Zoom meetings, it is difficult to see everyone. I know I have had challenges. I wish there was a way with Zoom you could rearrange the tiles of the people you see, and maybe there are, and I just don't know that. But everyone has a different view on Zoom. And as a result, it does create some challenges on being able to know the hierarchy of command and things along those lines. Once we are back in person, and I don't know, maybe you can shed some light on that as to, is there a time frame? Do we know?
No.
You'd be the first to know.
Okay.
We would let our board chairs know instantly, and I have not heard anything, not even rumors.
Okay.
City council will be first whenever that happens.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So follow the city council. Once they start meeting in person, other boards and committees are not far behind.
Okay. Okay. Steve?
Going back to what I brought up in August, I still felt that this was a difficult document to put together when we're trying to outline two different style of meetings, in person and Zoom. Yet we're trying to incorporate both styles going down a one-way street together. And I think that's where we're running into issues. Is it in person or is it in Zoom? Or are we trying to meet both styles of meetings? And again, I think that's where our stumbling points are.
Okay. Jamie?
I hate to break it to you, Steve, but I don't think we're ever going back to only in person. I think that there's always going to be, going forward, a component of interactive Zoom meeting or Google Meet or whatever it is, there's going to be something where there are going to be people who are participating in the meeting remotely. And we don't know what that format's going to look like. And that's part of the reason why the city has not gone back to in-person meetings. But there will be, and we can figure this out too. I mean, like this rules and regulations can be passed tonight and then amended 6 months from now once we have a concept of what those, hybrid meetings look like.
And you raise a point that I actually hadn't considered. I thought that one day that we would just end Zoom meetings, and we would all be back in person, just because given the nature of public participation. You might be right, and since you frequently are, I am nervous. So my thought here would be that one possibility would be that we add a sentence to Section 6 that says this applies only to meetings held remotely via Zoom, and then when we go back to in-person meetings or hybrid meetings, we could hypothetically revisit Section 6 with the expectation of it either lapsing, allowing us relatively free-form discussions in person with the expectation that the simple, organic, the board is up here in a position of authority and everybody else is out in the crowd, allows for a certain amount of structure that would not require this amount of regimentation or otherwise. I think one thing that's also true is that a lot of language here includes mays rather than shalls. So it's less likely to allow an applicant to be like, I'm going to sue you because you did not follow your own conduct rules. Whereas if we're breaking rules for someone, then hypothetically you could otherwise.
So how about if we go through and make sure that anything that does say shall is changed to may?
Can do that. And I'll just volunteer to do that offline, and then I'll send a draft out to everybody if we want to do that. But
and we kind of, I think that as this meeting format morphs and becomes whatever the next format, if we find there's a section that's not working, we address it. Jamie, you need to move more. Your light keeps turning on.
Motion sensors behind my monitor.
Oh.
So.
Okay. Do folks agree that if as I think with anything in here, if there's a time and place where people find that there's a portion of this document that is not working because we've changed our meeting format, or we have found that we really need to go back and revisit the number of agenda items or anything along those lines, it is at anyone's request to have a review of the rules and regulations. I don't feel this. Yeah, I can tell you, having been on the board for close to 10 years, if not more, I don't even remember how long it's been. This is the first time we've ever done this.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is kind of an indication that we're finally getting to the point where we're going to do this right. And so we should review it on a regular basis.
Okay.
Not every 10 years. Okay. Carrying on. Without oppose, I will say yes. Section 7. During the public hearing, the board shall conduct the proceedings in accordance with the following structure and with the following maximum time limits to be enforced by the board chairperson.
This is an intentionally duplicative section with the time limits that we discussed previously. My expectation is at this point we would have to change this language just because we deleted the previous time limits. This could either be like a directional, with the following aspirational time limits, or deleted entirely along with the parenthetical statements next to the 1 through 9.
I think we would need to remove the timeframes.
Mhm.
It's going to be better if we can either move things along, or if someone has a detailed plan, that we have the opportunity to be able to hear more. Okay. And then as we move down, the ZBA shall grant wide latitude to abutters and members of the public wishing to comment on an application, while reserving the right to limit presentations which are uncivic or which are not relevant to the matters under consideration by the ZBA. The ZBA may also limit public comments that duplicate previously expressed public opinions, or may ask new commenters to simply state their agreement with past commentary rather than repeat said commentary in its entirety. Yeah.
This is an amalgam. This is the worst kind of compromise language, which is that a lot of people sent me edits that talked about making sure that duplicative comments people can't just repeat themselves. I baked them into this statement here. I think the statement works, but it's not exactly what anybody said, so I have no problem if people have objections to it. I should also say that I think the board has the authority to constrain public comments that they believe are duplicative, or to encourage an applicant to make a non-duplicative comment. These things are also controversial. Someone will say, actually, I'm saying something completely different, or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and it's a matter of keeping the crowd in control. And if they start going off the rails, I know we've talked about this, that we're going to have to be able to pull the reins in. Having the verbiage in there gives us the right to be able to do that, as opposed to all of a sudden having to be, come out of the box at them going, hey, we've heard enough. Next, we can say, excuse me, but per our zoning laws, our zoning board rules, there is a requirement that if there's duplicative commentary, we do have the right to ask you to sit down. Yes, Jamie.
I would just add that, we always tend to have a good feeling of whether or not this is going to be necessary. When you show up in the Zoom meeting and there's 40 people, you kind of, I've seen you do this, John, where you say, we're going to limit public speak to an hour, or we're going to limit each person to 2 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever. So, and yeah. Please don't repeat yourselves and stuff like that. So you've already been doing this. It's really nothing new than to what I think the way the board's been currently handling their hearings.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So if that's the case, if we're all good, Steve?
Just on that first highlighted where it starts off with the ZBA, can we just put the ZBA may also limit public comments that duplicate previously expressed public opinions, and stop it right there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it almost seems like the second part of that almost repeats what we just said.
Look, these rules.
No, it's not you. No, it's not you. It's not you. It was probably one of my edits. So
no, it was absolutely me, and I knew it was being duplicative, which I was going to joke about. But yeah, no, I think it preserves the meaning of it.
Thank you.
Okay. And does that sound reasonable?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then the next thing is, any ZBA member may call on the chairperson to conduct a straw poll in order to hold an informal, non-binding vote to determine members' impressions of an application before the board. If the chairperson agrees to do so, they shall invite the board member to indicate by a show of board members to indicate by a show of hands whether they would vote in favor of an application currently before the board. This vote shall not be taken to be binding and does not and does not constrain board members from making decisions not in keeping with the straw poll vote. Board members may abstain from participating in the straw poll.
So just for explanation, this paragraph is from whence everything else sprang, basically. Originally, this agenda item started as a suggestion by Tony to add something that would allow us to shortcut dialogue at some point to get a sense of whether the board already agreed on something or disagreed on something, as the case would be, rather than drag on meetings and hearing processes for a lengthy period of time. The straw poll here is a fairly unique mechanism, and it would not need to be enshrined in the rules and regs. You could hypothetically do a straw poll without it being written down somewhere, but I wanted to put the straw poll in the ordinance, in the rules and regs, so that an applicant would never say, oh, you said you were going to vote yes, because now that last 2-sentence period says the board could say a straw poll, everyone sounds like they're going to vote for it, and then everyone can vote against. The board has absolute freedom to change their mind. The straw poll is just so that board members can see where other board members stand.
I can tell you that is probably one of the Zoom things, one of the challenges with Zoom. When you're sitting in the same room with people, you get a sense pretty quick by the people sitting around you, whether they agree or they don't. But Zoom doesn't have that feel. You can't do that. Yes, Lisa?
There was one, speaking of Zoom, I had similar thoughts. One of the lines said by a raise of hands. We had talked about how sometimes it's hard to see folks over Zoom. I was wondering if there could be something added about, how we can show a vote over Zoom, perhaps some way to put that in there in case, it's harder. I'm not sure. Maybe that's just being nitpicky, but I'm thinking about how if we're virtual or people are having technology issues, if we could indicate it in some other method as well.
Okay, so I'll just if that is an issue, which I think makes sense, I could add another statement which says by show of hands or equivalent for a remote meeting protocol.
You can also just shortcut that and just say, if the chairperson agrees to do so, they shall take a straw poll, and you don't have to put the exact, and leave it to the board chair to say, all in favor, say aye, or raise your hand, or whatever. Like, you can be a little spontaneous in there.
Okay, let me just, they shall conduct a straw poll. Hold on a sec, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Curtis, I'm laughing that you have changed your name to now say the other assistant planner.
When Lisa showed up, it wasn't on my name. And I wasn't gonna steal Jamie's, whatever. I lost my place. They should conduct to
Chairperson agrees to do so. They shall conduct.
Okay. If a chairperson agrees to do so, they shall conduct a straw poll.
Period.
Okay. Great.
Yeah. Don't make it. The longer winded you get, the more somebody can find a problem with what you said.
It's the truth of my life. All right. So that's I've made that edit.
Okay. And that is the last item that was highlighted. But I will say this, is there anything else that people had seen while reviewing that they would like to look at? And Matt, you are muted currently.
One thing I noticed that we do have a provision for in the budget to hire a note taker, a meeting minutes taker. And I was going to suggest that we do that. I've served on other boards where they hire an outside scribe to take the minutes. And I think that removes any appearance of a conflict of interest with the planning department being the note keepers as well and the official record keepers.
I can provide a little background on that. Back under Mayor Tautznick, the ZBA had a very small budget to hire a clerk. that stipend went to the city clerk, who Barbara, who was the administrator for the ZBA at the time. When I was hired, I took over for Barbara, and that stipend, the small stipend, became part of my duties. I became the administrator for the ZBA. Somewhere in 5 or 6 years ago, all of these stipends got moved out of the boards. The ZBA no longer has their own separate budget or abilities to hire their own record keeper. And those funds got moved into salary positions for planning department. And the expectation is that the planning department provides administrative staff time above and beyond what that stipend was actually covering for note taking. So that record keeping that you could employ, someone else. It is up to the board. I mean, if the board wanted to fire the planning department, I suppose the board could do that. But there's no budget or line item anymore for that under the ZBA.
Okay.
Hypothetically, couldn't the board identify that they would want a different city staff person to take minutes? Like right now, the planning board gets its minutes done by Zoe. I don't do those minutes. We would have to, but I think it would probably have to be a raise for Zoe as well.
Right. And part of that, when Zoe came, when Zoe's position was created for clerking different boards, I mean, there was, I believe that there was funds that were moved. There were funds that were moved. I don't know exactly how but part of her position was created with the intention that she would become that position is the planning board clerk. So,
not like a general, yeah.
Right, and like the mayor's assistant, Lindsay, is the clerk for the licensing commission. So different boards and committees have different ways of doing it. Many boards and committees take their own notes and are responsible for making their own minutes from the volunteer members. So in this case, the ZBA doesn't do that. The planning staff does that. And
it came up in conversation, I think, in last meeting as well, that was a possibility. I'm just throwing it out there if it's something we could explore. Otherwise, I mean, it sounds like if the funds aren't there, I mean, the question is, was that the intention that they should have been there? And I wasn't on the ZBA back then, but did the board agree, yeah, we'll let the planning department take this over? Or is it something that we should consult with the city solicitor to say, hey, is this like proper to have the planning department kind of involved in the operation of the ZBA?
Well, the
ZBA is responsible to take their own minutes. That is the responsibility of the ZBA. Every board and committee is responsible to file their own agendas and take their own minutes according to the open meeting law. The ZBA has at one point in time had a budget there was the small stipend to hire a clerk.
Right.
That decision was made years ago to bring those funds to the planning department. And the ZBA no longer has a budget. If the ZBA is dissatisfied with that, then that's a conversation that you can have with the mayor about, finding someone else or finding a different department or finding a different person to be the staff. We tried many times. John and Tony probably remember we had different clerks over the years that came in. They take notes for 6 months or so, and then they get tired of it. So the stipend was it was a $10 an hour to show up for 2 hours a week or 2 hours a month. So someone's getting paid $25, $30 to show up to take notes, and it just was not. More often than not, we had just vacancies, so we couldn't actually find someone who was willing to do it outside of a city staff member who is already.
The question I have, Jamie, is if we had a scribe or well, for lack of a better term, we'll call it personal scrap. Would you and or Curtis still attend meetings?
I mean, so I can't speak for Curtis, but I can speak for myself. I have stopped scribing and I still attend the meetings occasionally as Curtis, and I discuss it. Part of Curtis's job responsibility is administrative staff to the ZBA. So I would imagine that he would still be here to.
Because scribing isn't the entirety of it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and the reason I ask is that I can tell you that it's you and Curtis, the planning board's knowledge of the zoning laws is critical when we start to make a decision or we start to think about what we want to do and things along those lines. So I find that it is actually helpful to have you there for verbiage, for, hey, this is really important that we make sure we have that portion of the zoning rules covered with whatever decision we make. Secondly,
100%.
Yeah. Secondly, we are technically the Board of Appeal against the building inspector's decision or a rule that's within the zoning rules. I can tell you that other towns, the building inspector or building commissioner attends the meetings. And because they have every right to, quote unquote, defend their decision or the rule. And I don't feel that that is necessary in what we do and how we do it, but that is something that building commissioner, the new building commissioner, has every right to do, as they are, the applicant is appealing their decision. So I would not want to create a slippery slope for the board in pushing the planning board or the planning department away. Does that make sense to members of the board?
Yep.
So, okay. Is there anything else folks need to talk about? I know it feels like it's midnight, but it's really only 9. It's only 9 o'clock. It's only 6 o'clock.
It's 9 o'clock somewhere.
So, okay. I appreciate everyone's effort and time they've taken to review this document multiple times and give feedback back to Curtis and Jamie, your time to really hash through what everyone has said. I think it was an exercise that was well worth the time and effort that we put into it, and I hope that it will benefit us for the foreseeable future, but not for the next 10 years. We need to review it more than every 10 years.
You want to take an official vote?
Yeah.
I think that's where.
Actually, before we take that official vote, I just want to say, for an administrative perspective, if a vote is taken to approve these rules and regs with the amendments made tonight, then just for ease of process, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the edits that you all proposed and send it on to the city clerk, which is the next appropriate step. They will then be posted on our website, and I'll email that all out to the board. If in any way you say, oh, the edits that you made don't fit with the ones that we discussed, the board can then immediately amend it. The only thing I don't want to do is to have another, keep meeting on the subject, basically, We can either...
I agree completely.
Gotcha.
Okay.
All right, so can we get a motion to approve the rules and regulations with the amendments made this evening?
I'll make a motion to approve the rules and regulations with the amendments we made this evening.
Okay. Can I get a
Second
second?
that motion.
Okay. Lisa's making her first big move there as an associate member. All right. So a motion's been made and seconded, and by a show of hands, all in favor?
All right.
All right. We have 4, and Matt?
I'd rather wait till we see the amendments. I think there's several things that are, we talked about that are, I'm a little unclear how it's going to be amended. You said you're going to remove every word that said shall and say may.
In
Correct.
section 6.
So that'll be interesting to see that. But I mean, you want to vote because we don't want to keep rolling around in this forever. I understand that.
Yeah, and that we are, we can amend at any point.
Right.
All right. So,
Well, I would vote against it. I think you've been 10 years without this amount of legalese. It seems unnecessary. It's an aspirational document at best. And
well, with a vote of 4-1, the motion does pass, but your comments are duly noted, Matt.
thank you.
Okay. And is there anything else on the agenda for this evening?
Nope.
Okay, our next meeting will be held Wednesday, December 15th. Even though we usually have them on the fourth Wednesdays, but because it's the holiday week, we're going to move it. Is that the plan?
As it stands right now, that's from the schedule we published at the beginning of the year. But if we want to change that, feel free to let me know. I can let the clerk know immediately.
No, I think that works. It works for my schedule.
Yeah.
Same here.
All right. Does it work for everyone else's schedule? 15th?
Yes.
All right. Then we will see you all on the 15th. Are there, let's be at that point, are there any applications currently on file?
Nothing that I see
No.
coming down the pike.
Okay.
I communicated
well,
with some people about a couple of things, but they've mostly just been like, I don't really want to pull a variance.
Okay. Well, folks have until December 8th at noon to apply. That's submission. New applications must be received by November 24th at noon. So there we are. All right. Motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right. All in favor?
All right.
All right.
All right. Happy
Good night.
Thanksgiving to all.
And I'm just
Take
going
care.
to
Thanksgiving.
record Matt. I saw you raise your hand. Can you have seconded that motion?
I second it.
Thank you very much.
There we go.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Stay warm out
Nice to
there.
meet everyone.
All right. Bye now.